Welcome everyone to the first event of the Augustine Bioethics Network. And I first would like to invite my fellow speakers to introduce themselves, starting with Danielle.
Hello, yes, good evening. My name is Danielle de Zeeuw. My background is as a doctor, but I'm currently working as a researcher for the Scottish Council on Human Bioethics.
Thank you.
And my name is Professor Mark Taubert. I'm a palliative medicine consultant in Cardiff in Wales, where I'm also a clinical director, and I'm lead for Wales for future care planning. So all things relating to future care plans, DNA CPR forms, advanced care planning type documents, and policy making as well, and advise Welsh Government on those matters as well. Hi.
Thank you. And my name is David Albert Jones, and I'm Professor of Bioethics at St Mary's University, and I'm also Secretary to the Augustine Bioethics Network. And we're going to look at tonight how the debate on legalization of assisted suicide has played slightly differently in the different parts of the United Kingdom, or at least in Scotland, in England, and in Wales, taking them in that order. So I'd like to start by inviting Danielle to tell us a bit about what has been happening in Scotland.
Before we look at the details of the latest bill, I figured it was worth just casting our eyes back over recent history, because since the Scottish devolution from Westminster, there have actually been 4 attempts to legalise assisted suicide. So the first was back in 2005, when Jeremy Purvis submitted a right to die bill. And this one's usually forgotten about because it failed so early on, but it did set the stage for what's to come. Because just a few years later, Margot MacDonald's end-of-life assistance bill was brought before Parliament, and it sought to legalise both assisted suicide and euthanasia. It was defeated at stage 1 by a large majority. But not one to give up so easily, she reintroduced a revised bill in 2012, and this one focused solely on assisted suicide, and it also introduced some more detailed safeguards. But still, it was rejected at stage 1. Now, in 2021, Liam MacArthur announced that he was developing a new bill, and that's the Assisted Dying for Terminally Ill Adults Bill, and that's the one that we're going to look at just now. So after a long period of consultation and development, this bill was formally introduced to the Scottish Parliament in March 2024, and it would allow terminally ill patients to request drugs to end their life. So the drugs needed to be self-administered under the supervision of a healthcare professional. So the bill originally proposed that individuals must have an advanced and progressive illness, although this was later amended to having less than 6 months to live. Other eligibility criteria included being age 16 or over, but that was later amended to age 18, being resident in Scotland for at least 12 months and registered with a Scottish GP. So 2 independent doctors must confirm the diagnosis and declare that the patient has capacity and that there are no signs of coercion. And other safeguards as well included a 2-week reflection period and mandatory discussion about palliative care options. So the first vote, which was on the general principles of the bill, it was held a year later, and it passed with a significant margin. 70 MSPs voted for and 56 against. So after that, it was passed to the Health, Social Care and Sports Committee. And over the course of 4 meetings, this largely pro-bill committee rushed through a total of 298 amendments, and they agreed to only 74. So there were many safeguards which were dismissed at this stage, such as the doctor not being allowed to raise the option of assisted dying, of hospices being exempted, and of ensuring that the patient has full access to palliative and social care. But still, despite this, the bill comfortably passed its stage 2 vote, which meant it then entered stage 3, which brought it back to Parliament. And at this stage, over 300 amendments were debated, which is a lot for stage 3. Of those, 175 were passed, including the addition of the prognostic requirement of 6 months or less to live. And another significant change was the removal of Section 18, which would have allowed healthcare professionals with a conscientious objection to opt out. And it was found that this issue was outside of the competence of the Scottish Parliament. And so it would have to be agreed with Westminster after the bill had passed, which obviously raised some concerns. So the final vote was last month on the evening of the 17th of March. There were many personal and emotional stories shared, but there was also repeated mention of coercion and the risks for vulnerable people. And as the evening went on, it started to become clear that there were a number of MSPs who were planning to switch their vote. But when the results did come in, there was all-round surprise at just how decisively the bill was defeated. So 69 MSPs voted against, which meant that there were 12 who voted for at stage 1 had actually switched their vote. So it was still very close. So looking back at previous bills, we can say that this bill was a lot more tight. It was more structure and had detail on eligibility and the roles of health professionals. And the one thing that I really noticed was that it really aimed to place assisted dying right in the middle of healthcare, so promoting as a valid and reasonable treatment. And this is in line with some of the wider cultural changes that we've been seeing in healthcare for a long time. So even in the time since I qualified, there's been increasing emphasis on autonomy and choice and a sense of control, which assisted dying, of course, taps right into. And I think this is why self-administration was such a strong element of the bill. It creates this image of patients having control and at the same time offers doctors kind of this moral distance from the act of killing. So another point that's been repeatedly raised by opponents of the bill is the switch in language. Assisted suicide is now assisted dying, which removes the violent and tragic connotations of suicide. So language has definitely been used as a powerful tool to shape public perceptions. So why did it then end up failing? So most bails in Scotland, if they're accepted at stage 1, will go through, but this one fell at the last hurdle. So we think that this is probably due to a combination of factors, some of which are unique to the Scottish context, but most are relevant everywhere. So in terms of the Scottish context, the bill took a long time to go through Parliament. And generally it's the case that the more time there is to think, the deeper issues become clear. So the Scottish system gave the MSPs this time. We can also look back at stage 2 and question whether the committee did themselves a disservice by rushing through a rather weak bill. And it probably also helped that the leaders of the 3 main parties were openly against the bill. But perhaps even more significant than that was the fact that many MSPs were leaving after this session, which meant that they might have been able to vote more freely. As for the arguments which defeated the bill, the word that kept coming up in the final debate was coercion. So coercion was presented from different angles. Some MSPs talked about coercion from individuals, so as in cases of domestic and elder abuse and exploitation. Others talked about coercion from society as a whole, so from negative attitudes towards dependency, which many patients internalize. And there was lots of concern about coercion through circumstance, such as poverty and lack of social care. Pam Duncan-Glancy argued that it is inconceivable to suggest that the introduction of assisted dying is about choice when disabled people do not have choices in life. In a world where so many have little or no choice, we cannot risk making death the only choice that they ever have. Brian Whittle also stated that assisted dying cannot be seen in isolation. It must be a real choice. It must be a choice that includes appropriate palliative care, social care, and medical care. Without those elements of care, it is no choice at all. So ironically, what happened is that the emphasis on autonomy and choice, the arguments that are generally used by proponents of assisted dying, ended up undermining the bill. And the second big argument that came up was the removal of the employment protections for healthcare professionals. So without this conscientious objection clause, the Royal College of Psychiatrists, the British Geriatric Society, and pharmacists all came out as opposing the bill in the final days before the vote. And that also, I think, helped sway several MSPs. So what's next for Scotland? Already some politicians have stated that they hope assisted dying comes back in the next parliament. With a big turnover of ministers, there is a lot of uncertainty, but we can, I think, take courage from the fact that although Holyrood has been described as one of the world's most socially progressive legislators, the bill still failed, and the reason for its defeat are relevant throughout the UK. So one good thing, of course, is that it's put the need for improved palliative care right at the forefront. And people are looking at death and dying anew and asking important questions about what it means to die well. One thing we keep coming back to in our discussions in the SCHB is that there seems to be a loss of understanding about the concept of human dignity. So the inherent value of human life was hardly mentioned at all during debates. And when this foundational principle is conceded or ignored or just not explained, you're really left with only the arguments about safeguards. And that, unfortunately, leaves the door wide open for assisted dying to come back again and again with different safeguards. So I, for one, hope that in the future, some of these foundational concepts can maybe be reclaimed or harnessed in a different way. Thank you very much. I will stop sharing.
Thank you very much, Danielle. And now to move from Scotland to England, and in relation to the recent bills, the bill in England was more recent than the bill in Scotland. The build-up towards the current bill, I think you can date it. Well, you can probably date it to the day of the 19th of December 2023, which was the beginning of a campaign by Dignity in Dying, with the announcement by Esther Rantzen that she was considering going to Dignitas. And this was very big in the Daily Mail, and there was a campaign involving Esther Rantzen and the Daily Mail and Dignity in Dying, which was aimed towards, in particular, getting the leaders of the parties to commit to giving time to a bill if a bill were to come up. But the reason for doing it at this time was because there was a large expectation that there would be a change of government in the summer of 2024, and that the next Prime Minister would be the leader of the Labour Party, Keir Starmer, who was known to be in favour of assisted dying, as he would call it, assisted suicide. So it was thought that this was a great opportunity, I think, for the people who were in favour of a change in the law in England. And so there was a lot of campaigning during that time, the first half of 2024. And then when there was the general election in the summer, there was indeed a very large swing to Labour, and a Labour Party with a majority of over 160, with a leader of the party who was known to be in favour of legalisation of assisted suicide, and who had publicly committed to giving time to assisted suicide. And then in the first ballot for private members bill in the September of 2024, the person who came top of the ballot, Kim Leadbeater, though she had not been somebody who in the past had expressed a particular interest in this topic, decided to take the legalisation of assisted suicide as the topic of her private members bill. And she was a member of the Labour Party. So all of these things now seemed to align to be the best chance for people who were in favour of legalisation of assisted suicide to change the law. And so the Terminally Ill Adults End of Life Bill had its second reading in the November of 2024, and it passed comfortably, I think by 330 to 275. That is a majority of 55. So in order to overturn this, whereas in Scotland they needed I think 7 people to change their minds, in Westminster they needed 28 MPs to change their mind in order to defeat this bill. So that was an extremely large ask. The bill was similar to the Scottish bill and to previous attempts at legislation in England, in that it was restricted to assisted suicide, not including euthanasia. That is to say, the person had to do it themselves. You couldn't have a doctor or another healthcare professional do it. And also it was restricted to people who were terminally ill and expected to die within 6 months. That also was something which had been in previous legislation in the United Kingdom. A difference in the legislation which is brought forward by Kim Leadbeater, an innovation, was that it should also have the extra safeguard of a High Court judge, of a legal procedure prior to agreement to assisted suicide. So that as well as the medical procedure, you would have this legal procedure which was headed by a High Court judge, and that would give an extra safeguard which hadn't been in previous bills and didn't exist in other jurisdictions. And this was one of the things which persuaded so many people to back the bill. Another thing that persuaded people to back the bill was that the sponsor, Kim Leadbeater, committed to the public bill stage being able to take evidence, so that she said there would be extra scrutiny to the bill in a way that there wasn't for previous legislation. But what happened was that in the public bill stage, first of all, the public bill committee was stacked 15 to 8. So in terms of people who were in favor of her, not just legislation in general, but the particular legislation she was bringing forward, so that every time there was a division in the committee, every time there was a vote in the committee, 90 times out of 92 times it went with the sponsor of the bill. So it meant that even though there were some criticisms of the bill, which came up in committee, all of the amendments, nearly all of the amendments which were passed, were actually amendments from within the people who were in favor of the bill. And also that the evidence that was taken was largely one-sided evidence. It was evidence from people who were suggesting that there were no problems with the bill. So even though the public bill stage lasted for quite a long time, and in that sense there was a lot of scrutiny, it wasn't scrutiny which actually changed the substance of the bill. Except that some of the changes that were put forward by Kim Leadbeater, of which there were 150, so there were many changes to the bill, but all from the sponsor. One of them was to take out the High Court judge. So the innovation which was supposed to make the bill stronger, in fact, was taken out. Then after the public bill committee stage, there were only 3 days of debate that most MPs had about all of these extra changes and about other amendments that MPs would like to see. So that when it came to its third reading, it still passed, but it passed with a much reduced majority. It passed with a majority of only 23 and no longer a majority of Parliament. And then it went from the Commons to the Lords. And before it arrived at the Lords, there were 2 Lords committees, the Constitution Committee and the Delegated Powers Committee, which had a look at the bill. And they were, to be polite, scathing about the bill. They thought that the bill was very badly drafted. And they said that this was because, unlike government legislation, it hadn't had a period of pre-legislation scrutiny. So that the bill was really sort of made up on the hoof during the process by people who were in favor of the bill. But it hadn't had the kind of level of scrutiny that a government bill would have had. And one of the conclusions of that, the results of that, was that it included many extra delegated powers, actually 42 delegated powers, where difficult issues in the bill were referred to future legislation, future regulation by the Secretary of State. So how it would be delivered, whether it would be delivered by the NHS, all of these things, whether you could restrict advertising, all of these things were to be decided by regulation by the Secretary of State. So you had a bill which didn't say on the face of it how it would actually be implemented. It was also, for a private member's bill, rather, it was extremely long. The typical length of private member's bill which passes in this country is about 4 pages. The terminally ill adults end of life bill is 51 pages. So it's a very long bill, which includes lots of difficult and some novel elements. And so it is not surprising that it attracted a lot of amendments. It also attracted a lot of concern and interest from peers in the House of Lords, so that there were actually 2 days of second reading. And this was only the third time since the war that there had been 2 days of second reading for a bill in the House of Lords, for a private member's bill in the House of Lords. And the other two were both one was in 1957, one was in 1965, and they were both about capital punishment. So this was an issue that really gripped people, and so you had a lot of peers who then were interested in it, who wanted to speak on it, who wanted to put forward amendments. So the result of which was that eventually it was running out of time, and we will see what happens in 2 weeks' time. On the 24th will be the last session, but realistically, there is no way that it can get through all the amendments which were put forward. Those who were in favour of the bill have criticised opponents for filibustering by putting forward extra amendments and talking for too long, and that kind of thing, and said that this was due mainly to half a dozen members of the House of Lords. But in fact, 147 members of the House of Lords have spoken in these various debates, and they've spoken on average for 6 or 7 minutes. So it isn't the case that people are making long speeches. It is the case that this was a very badly drafted bill, and as a result of which it is going to run out of time. And at that point, I'm running out of time, so I will hand over to Mark, who will tell us about what has happened in Wales.
I've included a helpful little map of where Wales is for the international audience members. So Wales next to England, part of the United Kingdom, and Wales has its own Senedd, its own Welsh government, but only certain areas are devolved, and it's a little bit different again to Scotland, who have more devolved powers in terms of what they're able to do. But Wales would essentially, if the Kim Ledbetter bill that David has outlined just now, co-opt the English bill, if you like. And I call it the English bill because it's been very much written with England in mind, and Wales very much as a second thought, which is really also one of the areas that we were concerned about in this. So the BBC reported on this very recently. There was a vote in Wales, so-called legislative consent motion vote to adopt whatever is voted on essentially in Westminster, which went through, and I'll give you a little bit more detail about this. But the reporting from the BBC was quite poor, and I'll really go into that a little bit later on as well. Yeah, the terminally ill adults bill that we're talking to here that introduces a private members bill, as David has said. It essentially seeks to amend the UK Suicide Act from 1961 to protect individuals acting within its provisions from criminal liability, and then sets out the regulatory framework for how assistance must be provided. Assisting suicide outside these provisions would remain an offence under the Suicide Act. The UK government maintains a neutral stance on the passage of the bill, and back in October 2024, the Welsh Senedd actually held a non-binding vote on assisted dying and rejected the principle of assisted dying. So also noteworthy. So after many debates and lots of conversation, and many of us talking to members of the Senedd in terms of our more broad and general concerns, they voted against the general principle. So this more recent vote in 2026 was a different matter, and I'll tell you a little bit about that, because it was a motion on whatever the law that the UK government was going to pull through was going to be, and whether Wales would accept this as such. So why was legislative consent needed from Wales? It was required because there are some areas, such as healthcare, that are devolved to Wales, but law is not. So it was really kind of getting more detail on guidance about the operation of the Act, finding out detail about regulations on how voluntary assisted dying services would operate in Wales, and see how monitoring by a voluntary assisted dying commissioner would work, and also requirements for bilingual information. And again, for international audience members here tonight, Wales has another language, or primary language, if you like, which is Welsh. So diolch yn fawr for having me at this meeting tonight. Diolch yn fawr is Welsh for thank you very much. But there is a separate language, and for some people in Wales, Welsh is their first language, and English is only their second language. So these are important things to consider. So why was, again, legislative consent needed? UK Parliament seeks the Senate's consent before legislating in this devolved area of Wales. It's a politically rather than legally binding convention, and UK governments can still proceed if the Senate withholds its consent. Welsh government had laid a legislative consent memorandum on the 9th of April 2025, followed by a supplementary legislative consent memorandum on 4th of July 2025. And then further supplementary legislative consent memoranda were laid, covering amendments in the House of Lords during the committee stage, which had not been agreed, and the House of Lords debate goes on. I won't say too much about that in the interest of brevity. Here's a few of us who have been involved with talking to Senate members. We also got the actress Liz Carr, who you can see second from left here, who came to the Senate with us and talked about some of the issues as they affect disabled people. But yeah, a group of us clinicians also wrote a letter, an open letter to members of the Senate, in terms of laying out our concerns, why we felt this current bill in Westminster is actually dangerous, is actually inadequate, is too vague, and why we felt it would not work for Wales in particular. And the letter, I won't read all of it out, but it's a matter of public record. This letter looks at things like the UK Mental Capacity Act, which wasn't really designed to access suicidality. It looks at eligibility to access these legal drugs, especially for people who feel a burden or because of a lack of services. And one of our real concerns was that palliative care is not equal. And we know that as palliative care clinicians. Some areas have good access to palliative care. Some people, palliative care is pretty much absent. There's a health board not far from me, and I had a phone call from it not too long ago when I was on call one night about a patient who was dying and really wanted to die at home. And we couldn't even provide in that health board overnight district nurses. That's not even palliative care nurses. That's not even palliative care professionals. That's just general district nurses to cover things like, you know, changing the medications, changing a syringe driver, changing a catheter. So that person had to go into hospital to die. So when there's such an inadequate provision of such services, we felt it was very important to get those services much better. Otherwise, that person may feel, well, I don't have an option. I don't have any palliative care. So my only real option to play it really safe is to opt for an assisted dying service. and we felt that wasn't right. Just briefly take you through some of the slides that I shared on my social media about some of the issues we felt were important. For instance, that the UK government had devolved powers to Scotland, so that Scotland can make its own decision on legalizing assisted suicide, as you heard from Danielle earlier as well. And we wondered why it hadn't done the same thing for Wales. Westminster, it had all been done in a backward stage, as I've said previously. MPs had voted initially to give Wales the power to decide when assisted dying comes into force. But then later at report stage, Kim Leadbeater, sponsor of the bill, insisted these powers be stripped out. And MSs, in our view, should demand that this power is given back to Wales. I think Wales has been treated quite shabbily in this whole process, whether you believe in assisted dying or not. But Welsh Government has actually had to update its legislative consent motion multiple times because the sponsor keeps changing the goalposts. And the bill is still in flux, so we're really consenting on something that we don't know. We don't know the end product in many ways. And it changes the foundation of the NHS in Wales. Again, for international audience members, the NHS is kind of a big pride of Wales because the NHS the father of the NHS is Welsh in Iron Bevan, and you're really rewriting the foundations of the NHS if assisted dying comes in. So just to really recap, every assessment, every panel session, everything would fall to Welsh health boards and Welsh ministers, but the bill was very much designed for England with Wales's needs tacked on and, really second, really as an afterthought. If it had been a government bill, a proper government bill, rather than a private member's bill, then this would have been looked at in far more detail. The vote on this legislative consent motion in the end went in the favor of the assisted dying bill being consented to. I'll put it that way. I think many Senate members were concerned about this bill, but they were perhaps persuaded that if they didn't consent to whatever Westminster produced, they would have something imposed, or that the NHS wouldn't deliver it, but it would be delivered via backdoor private services. And I think there was quite a lot of scaremongering from the campaign groups and Dignity and Dying and some politicians as well, because we don't believe that would have been the case as such. So I'll stop there, I think.
Thank you very much, Mark. I thought we would just have, perhaps as time's going on, we would just have maybe 5 minutes or so just between the three of us before we start picking up some questions. One thing I noticed you said in passing was that the Suicide Act 1961 was UK legislation. Of course, it is not. It is England and Welsh legislation. In Scotland, there is no Suicide Act, and suicide is treated under the common law and under the law on homicide. So that's another example of how sometimes England and Wales are more closely aligned. Sometimes Scotland is slightly different. Yes, Danielle, so could you say something about how was there much interest in Scotland in how the debate was going on in England? Was there some interaction between those two, or do you think that Scotland was very much its own kind of self-contained debate and people didn't bother so much about what was going to happen south of the border?
No, I think maybe Scotland likes to think about that sometimes, but the reality is that no, we were very closely watching what was happening in Westminster and wondering because there was uncertainty about when our votes would be compared to Westminster. So the question, would it be better to have our vote first or the other way around? And there was definite discussion about what would happen if this or if that. So yeah,
yes,
intimately connected.
That was also my recollection, because I mean, in the end, as Mark mentioned, the legislative consent motion in Wales happened before the vote in Scotland. Had it happened after the vote in Scotland, it might have been different. But perhaps at this point we'll go to questions. So I have a question. A major issue in Scotland was the lack of palliative care. How can we make sure this stays on the agenda going forward? So, Danielle,
yeah, that's a good question. My understanding is that I think one of the MSPs, I can't remember who it is, has stated that they would want to bring a new bill in the next Parliament to make palliative care accessible to all as a right. Is it Miles Briggs? No, I can't remember who it is. But yeah, that's definitely, we're hoping that will keep on the forefront of politics in the next session.
So now, Mark, I was going to ask you, in the vote at the Senedd, there was the vote on what they were asked to vote on, which is the legislative consent, but they also added an amendment to it, a rider to it. Would you like to say what they added to and stated in their legislative consent?
I wish I could quote it, but they essentially expressed their unhappiness about how Wales had been treated in a sense. So, you know, very much sort of the way this has been handled and the whole process of this. So I might have a look through it and read it out. But yeah, it was very much a sort of, it was very much a notion that it was very begrudging. If this went through, it was begrudging consent. Felt that the hand of Wales had been forced in this, and the way this had been done was not bullying tactics as such, but a sort of you better vote for this, otherwise something really nasty might be imposed on you. So you better vote for our less bad option that we devise here in Westminster, in a sense, how the services will be run.
Yes, and I should just mention to people, particularly for those outside the UK, but maybe also for some within it, that the proposal now from people, because almost certainly the bill in Westminster in the House of Lords is going to run out of time. The hope for people who wish to see a change in the law is to reintroduce this in the Commons, but then to reintroduce this in the Commons using a mechanism called the Parliament Act, which is an act of Parliament which was passed in 1911, which would mean that if it passed in the Commons a second time in exactly the same form as it went to the House of Lords, then it could pass without having to go to the House of Lords, or rather without the agreement of the House of Lords. So this is a proposal at the moment, is that the act be brought back into the House of Commons if they find somebody top of the ballot in order to do so. But if they use the Parliament Act, it would have to be exactly the same bill. And that means in relation to Wales and in reaction to relation to all of the problems which have been discussed in the House of Lords, those could not be addressed, because they would have to, if they would have to take it in the form that it went to the House of Lords. So the use of the Parliament Act is particularly concerning as a mechanism, because it wouldn't allow any further amendment to the bill. For which reason, I hope that even if a bill is reintroduced in the Commons, that MPs won't be happy to accept it on that basis, because certainly both in relation to Wales and in relation to many issues in the House of Lords, it has been shown to be a flawed bill.
Just for discussion purposes, David, I just wonder, do you? I mean, I know there's a few sort of quite hardline MPs who might want to bring this back as in exactly the same format with all the criticisms that have already been leveled at this particular bill. But I do wonder, because it would have to then go and be voted on by MPs again, whether some people at that stage might drop down further because they think, look, the House of Lords and many others have really criticized this bill quite heavily. We've had a bit more time to scrutinize this. So maybe, as Danielle said earlier, sometimes the time you spend on this, the time you spend looking on this is so important. And actually, the more time that passes, in a way, the more people will get quite cold feet about this bill. And actually, even if the Parliament, they try and get it to the stage of the Parliament Act, which I think, would then still require a vote by MPs beforehand, if I'm right, would actually be quite a perilous tactic in a way for campaigners.
I think if I were on the other side, if I were in favor of a bill, I would think that this was a
Obstinate.
Mhm. An
Obstinate.
outside chance, I would say. This, I think,
Outside.
they want to keep up the momentum, but I think it's an outside chance. But I raise it because it is an option which is being discussed, and I recall, in fact, even during the Senedd vote or immediately after the Senedd vote in Wales, they were talking about the possibility of the use of the Parliament Act. So it's been talked about at least since Christmas, because of this sense that they were not moving quickly enough through all of the amendments which were being put forward to this bill.
Yeah.
So
David, I've noticed there's a few comments in the chat. Do you want me to read some of them out, or?
Yeah.
Adrian has said the Labour candidates had playbook instructions, in inverted commas, I believe, in choice, and will support assisted suicide. An identical comment from 2 Labour MPs at Hustings who voted against and never believed this. Written by Pat McFadden's team, who ran the GE campaign. Many MPs have taken the groupthink seriously and cannot let go.
Yeah, well, I think that clearly there were people campaigning in favor and people who are campaigning against, and there were lots of shared information going to MPs and lots of MPs responding in a similar way. I think that it's also the case that the first time round, a lot of the Parliament was overwhelmingly a new Parliament. The majority of people in Westminster, when they voted on the Kim Leadbeater's bill, had only been in Parliament for less than 6 months.
Yeah.
And were in Parliament because of, or at least in their view, because of the leadership of Keir Starmer, who had won the election. So there was both a lack of understanding of how the processes work and how much scrutiny or how little scrutiny such a bill would get further down the line, and also there was a wish to all other things being equal, to follow the lead of the new leader of the Labour Party. And given that, it is rather extraordinary that a bill introduced by a member of the Labour Party, with a majority of 165, with the Prime Minister in favour, only managed to have a majority of 23 when it came to the vote. And I wouldn't have any confidence that if it came back again, that it would even get that. So I think, because I think that also it's noticeable that in terms of the criticisms of the bill and those who are in favour of the bill, within the Labour Party, those who are in favour were mainly on the right of the Labour Party and were emphasising choice, and were mainly from people who were, should we say, more middle class and more accustomed to being able to make those kind of choices. And those who are more on the left of the party and perhaps more concerned about people whose experience of the NHS and whose experience in general of society was that they didn't have access to a lot of things, that they were more critical of this bill. And my sense is that the Labour Party is seeking to move more to the left, and therefore to be possibly more critical about this kind of legislation.
Okay. Yeah. Richard has a question for Danielle, which is he would like to know more about the conscientious objection issue in Scotland, I presume. Did Bill originally allow clinicians to decline to take part, but sponsor removed that clause? Question mark.
Yeah, so the problem with Scotland is that obviously some things are within its competence and other things are still under Westminster. And so there's various aspects of the bill that were a little bit contentious and nobody was really sure. And conscientious objection was in the bill as it was introduced. And it was quite late on when it was discovered that actually it would come under something that was not in the Scottish under Scottish competence. I think it came under employment law, or there was, I don't know the exact details, but in the end at stage 3, so it was very late on, it had to be removed altogether before the final vote.
So
I think that had a big impact on what it finally happened.
So it was in December, wasn't it? It was only in December that it was that the health minister announced that in the view of the Scottish government, it was not competent to legislate on issues of conscience because this was something which was a reserved power. So there was only 3 months between that and the final vote, and so their workaround was, just pass it without any protections at all, and the protections will be reintroduced later by Westminster by another kind of mechanism, but we won't tell you exactly what those are because because they can't do it until after the bill is passed, which was a more difficult sell for the people who were in favour of the bill. Really, it put them in a very difficult position. Would you say is that accurate? My reading of it, Danielle?
Oh yeah.
I'm the designated comment reader outer here, so I might take Neil's comment, which is about the Isle of Man legislature, which is quite interesting. Is it known if any patients have utilized the service as yet? And presumably, if someone from the rest of the UK helped a relative, whatever, to get to the Isle of Man for this, they would be breaking the law. I think, as far as I know, the Isle of Man are still awaiting royal assent, and that has not yet been granted. So, Neil, no, it's not been rolled out there as yet. And I think similar for Jersey
I think
as well. So
Jersey is further along than the Isle of Man,
yes.
and there are problems, I think, with the Isle of Man, the way in which the Isle of Man legislation is framed, which are less true of Jersey. But in neither case have there been any deaths under these laws as yet.
Yeah. And he's a fellow palliative medicine consultant, only doctor on his team in a 700+ bedded hospital with around 100 deaths per month, making it very difficult to upskill non-specialists. And in his local palliative care network, he recently asked to meet about developing a charter on how we deliver on the assisted dying bill. When I suggested that whether you agree with the principle of the bill or not, we have to first sort out how the choice will not be the same as for those patients elsewhere in the network who are swimming in palliative care specialists, the reply was very derogatory, and that we just need to get on with a charter. It has really concerned me. I'm not surprised. It has also concerned me that the popular thing is to pump NHS money into hospices now, which is great. But what if the government then told them to provide an assisted dying service if they want to keep the money? I feel cynical about that and the motivation. I completely agree with you. And in fact, we had sort of in our own palliative care services locally preempted similar discussions from 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 boards and various others as well. And one of our services here has enshrined in its terms of references that the palliative care services won't be involved in any future assisted dying bill legislation or delivery as such as well. So I think that is something you can sometimes work on more locally within your team, and we're writing it into our terms of reference documents at the moment as well. But yeah, watch this space, because I think the pressure will start mounting if such a service becomes available.
And I'll read the next one because it's addressed to me, to David
Yep.
Jones. In the England-Westminster debate, was the concept of human dignity properly addressed? No. So I think that there is a problem. I mean, I have written about this elsewhere, and in a way it reflects some things that Danielle said earlier. The language of dignity is used in very different ways. So the main suicide organization in Switzerland, Dignitas, or at least for non-Swiss citizens, Dignitas is alludes to dignity, and the Voluntary Euthanasia Society is now renamed Dignity in Dying. So those who are in favor of assisted suicide or euthanasia very much present this as dignity, whereas those of us who are critical not only in practice or because of safeguards, but in principle, the principle is related to the valuing of the dignity of the life of every person, and the way in which a failure to protect people from suicidal ideation, from ending their own life themselves, is because of respect for their dignity. So the argument about dignity is quite fundamental, but it wasn't, I don't think, really addressed during the debate. And one of the problems on our side, and this we may need to think about this going forward, is that because we were put in a position where there were some people who were very strongly in favor and would really be in favor even if the legislation was very poor, because they would want to start somewhere. And there were some people who would against any kind of legislation. A large number of people were in favor in principle, but concerned in practice. And so the arguments, but from both sides, tend to focus on this middle group. And so people who were opposed in principle, rather than trying to advance this in principle argument, trying to make more people understand why it might be problematic in principle, tended to focus on the practical problems of implementation. So those kind of arguments, they have served their purpose in the sense that the legislation has not passed in Scotland, and it looks like will not pass in the House of Lords. But it is a matter of concern that a lot of people do approve of this in principle, and if we're in a longer term to try to shift the culture to understand why this is problematic, then I think that we need to also be thinking not just about these practical arguments, but about the sort of in principle questions about what it is to die well, what it is to respect human dignity, what human solidarity means in terms of people wanting to end their own life. And we're almost out of time. So could I ask either Mark or, well, first Mark and then Danielle, or no, first Danielle, because it should be ladies first, and then Mark. Would you like to say, give a final thought?
Oh, I think you put me on the spot there.
In which case, Mark first.
I think I'll always be an assisted dying critic. I'll put that out there. But it was very easy for me on this occasion to be an assisted dying critic, because the bill for England and Wales is just so awful and so vague and so full of clear flaws, that really put a lot of people that I see, a lot of vulnerable people, a lot of patients and their family members at risk, which also I think puts practitioners at risk as well. It was really interesting today to hear from Danielle also about how coercion landed with the Scottish politicians, because that is also something that very strongly landed with members of the Senate here in Wales. And every day we hear stories about women who've been abused or been in long-term abusive relationships. And then we also hear stories about users of assisted dying services worldwide, a lot of the time being women. And you hear stories about autistic women in the Netherlands accessing these services predominantly. And you just think this has to be so carefully thought through if you want to go through with something like this, and it can't be rushed through in a sort of slapdash way as has been tried here. It needs a proper government bill, a proper process if you want to go through with anything, and it needs proper scrutiny, and they need to listen to people like us who work with some very, very vulnerable people, and they don't need to listen to too many celebrities, in my view.
Thank you. Final thoughts, Danielle?
I'll leave it there.
So, also with the being aware of time, also I apologize that there's still questions coming through that we do not have time to answer, but this has been our first event, and I hope of many, and I hope people will continue to have these discussions both among themselves, but also through the Augustine Bioethics Network, which I will again shamelessly plug and say, please consider becoming a member, and do keep in touch both through the website and also by directly emailing us. I think for me personally, I think for Mark, I'm not sure about Danielle how long this process is. You've been involved in this, but certainly for Mark and I, many months on this bill, and it was very heartening to see the vote in Scotland. I was not at all sure which way it would go, and also for me, it's heartening to see really the amount of work and seriousness with which the House of Lords has scrutinised this bill, and going forward, I hope to try to help MPs to see, and also the public to see, that this hasn't simply been a delaying tactic, but that there has been a really serious and intense scrutiny of this bill, which has looked at some really important aspects about safety of medicine in general, and particularly the implications of this kind of legislation.
And can I just say, lots of lovely comments coming in the sidebar, saying how useful this meeting is, and Jude has written, thank you. Let's do more of these, please, as it helps me feel less alone professionally. Jude, you're definitely not alone, and I think we need to speak up, and we need to say what we feel, even if some people paint us as a nuisance. We need to keep going.
On which note, North Star, I might say.
Not bad.
Good night to all, and thank you for joining us.